The human body has been developing and evolving for eons. What started as a single amoeba has progressed to fish, to monkey/human, to finally human. And throughout the process, old grandfather evolution has gifted us with organs, acidic skin bags controlled by electricity that make living life possible. However, sometimes grandfather evolution forgets to correctly track his medication schedule, as he gifts us with some subpar, useless, or even counterproductive organs that aren't exactly vital. So, if you want to lose some weight, or live a truly minimalist lifestyle, you should keep note of these organs you could live without. We'll start with the organ that you likely thought of selling when you got your stimulus check from the government. That's right, it's the kidneys. The kidneys are a pair of Chicago vanity sculpture-shaped organs located right above the abdominal. Their job is to filtrate the blood from waste products so that the red stuff is nice and Fiji quality. Although it's not the best idea to remove both your kidneys, you can, however, remove just one of your kidneys and allocate its work intake to the other kidney and have everything work out just fine. Of course, you'll have to get it surgically removed or MacGyver it yourself with a box knife and a cloth to bite down on, but after a few weeks of recovery, you'll be the same person, just one kidney less. If you're really feeling spicy, you could even remove both your kidneys, because it's possible to replace both of them in the form of a high-tech blood filtration device, or you could just suck it up and live with some Dasani quality blood. So if you ever find yourself in a bathtub filled with ice, no memory of the past 24 hours, and strange cuts where your sides are, you can say, "Those bastards can take my kidneys, but they can't take my will to live." Because it's already gone. The next organ on our organ loaner list is the appendix. The appendix is actually like an organ with negative value, since it has no apparent use and is quite the pain. The appendix probably had some unknown use hundreds of thousands of years ago, but now it's just a hollow shell of its former self due to natural selection. It's a tiny, 9 centimeter long tube attached to the end of the long intestine. However, it's even worse in the Florida peninsula of the digestive system, as it commonly gets infected and needs to be removed before it infects the rest of the body. So you might be better off removing the old pestilence patch before it takes you as one of its next victims. I also want to note that some sources say that the appendix could be useful by providing a storage for beneficial gut bacteria, but like come on, have an Activia yogurt or something. Third up is the tonsils. There are technically 3 organs that fall under the name tonsils: the pharyngeal tonsils, the palatine tonsils, and the lingual tonsils, but the palatine tonsils are the only ones we or anybody cares about. These tonsils are located on the sides of the back of the throat, like little marbles. The tonsils were once thought to be completely useless, just like an appendix for the mouth, but later research found that the tonsils actually have a use in the immune system. They can produce white blood cells, which can go into the bloodstream and help fight infection. However, they aren't exactly the Michael Jordan of fighting off disease, since the white blood cells they do produce aren't exactly a sizable amount. Also, the tonsils can get inflamed, and even develop tonsil stones, which gives your throat a nice rocky feel to it, so tonsil removal is a pretty common process in these scenarios, and has minimal side effects. But nobody's exactly a huge fan of the tonsils. Nobody would be shocked if you told them that their tiny throat beads aren't pulling any weight, so I think it's time that we add some more significant organs to this video. Like the lungs. What? You thought medical science couldn't cut corners on the most basic bodily function as breathing? Think again. I think you're pretty familiar with the lungs, since you just used them in the past 10 seconds, which, by the way,
you are now breathing manually.
Lungs are, most basically, 2 airbags which take in air by inhaling, take in oxygen by smaller airbags on the inside of the lungs called alveoli, and then exhale that air in the form of carbon dioxide. However, this process is not required to be done by 2 lungs, which means, that's right, you can live with just 1 lung. Having 1 lung removed is a relatively simple process, just requiring 1 procedure, and the single lung can even function better when it's on its own, having more space to take up. However, the procedure is mostly only done in the case of a lung infection, or if a transplant is needed. However, I guess you could just get 1 lung removed for some extra space. Finally, we have the biggest modification for all of you who really want to live a wasteless life. That's right, it's the brain. What? Don't you know they call it gray matter for a reason? But for real, the brain is undoubtedly the most important organ in the body, being responsible for keeping virtually the entire thing running. However, not all of it is per se needed to keep it running. Notice the quotes there, folks. It's possible to remove sections of the brain and for the brain to still function relatively normally. The only thing that would change is that your brain wouldn't be able to perform some tasks performed in the centers of the brain parts you removed. For example, if you remove the right hemisphere of your brain, you would only be able to use your left eye and left hand, would have difficulty recognizing faces, and would not be able to have spatial awareness of your surroundings. But who needs that when you can just walk with a stick with your likely non-dominant hand and constantly question people about who they are? The main reason why we know that humans can survive with one hemisphere removed is because a hemispherectomy was once an epilepsy treatment. This was done since some patients' seizures would only spring up on one side of the brain, so doctors responded by removing that portion of the brain. Why, I have half a mind to do that. But seriously, don't mess around with your brain. Don't go playing poker with your cerebral functions. Well, that about wraps things up. I think the takeaway here is that yes, you can survive without a kidney, an appendix, a lung, your tonsils, or half your sanity, but I wouldn't go broke trying. Actually, side note, you can sell these organs on the black market illegally if you like some extra dough, but the black market video would be for another time. In fact, if you'd like to see that video, you can comment sure something, I don't know. Anyways, I have some YouTube dislikers to track down and teach a lesson. Catch you on the flip side.